Hey there! Today I will show a small tower defense game, I developed with Godot in 3 days. You play as a tiny mushroom guy, fighting wizards to defend your mushroom home from hungry creatures. I created and named it Mush Wizarding. I intended to submit the game to both the GMGK jam with the team loop and the mini jam 190 with the team underground and the limitation pocket sized. So I needed a concept that ticked all the boxes. I settled on a radial tower defense game set underground, where you're a tiny pocket-sized mushroom guy, meeting the mini jam team and limitation. And you recruit wizards, who endlessly loop around your house in a circle to fend off attackers, which ties into the GMGK jam team. I'll get it right out of the way and confess that I didn't submit the game to the GMGK jam. The reason behind it is so dumb that I'm a bit embarrassed. You'll see why later in the video. Anyway, let's get started. I kicked things off on Friday at 2:30 PM. The first thing I did was sketch the little house we're protecting, and the player character. At first, neither of them was mushroom team. The house looked more like a clay hut, and the character resembled a tiny red pepper. I gave our little guy a small fire star to protect himself with. I imported both sprites into a fresh Godot project, set up the pixel art friendly viewport and interpolation settings, and move on to making a tile set. I drew wall and ground tiles and blocked out a simple boxy level using Godot's tile map. Then I went back and sprinkled a few white bricks on the house roof to give it a mushroomy vibe. Looks tasty already, right? I tweaked the ground tile and made a brighter variant to suggest sunlight breaking through the cave ceiling. I painted a couple of little plants to liven up the cave floor. I filled in a pitch black tile for the cave passage the enemies will exit from. Next, I coded a basic character controller so we could finally move around. I added colorations for the walls and the house. I got a bit distracted and attempted to add a simple gut ray shining down on the house. But I realized that instead of a simple rectangle, I'd need a custom texture to match the lead ground tiles. I shelved that for later. Then I drew the first enemy, a tiny green bug, frog, crab, I'm still not sure what it is. But this harmless looking thing turned out to be an actual tiny devil, somehow dodging the wizards with ease. People later said it was the most annoying enemy in the game. I imported it to Godot and gave it one go, charged the house at any cost. And it worked well. I spawned a few of them, and boy do they really want that house, which sadly for them wasn't edible yet. They tried their best though. I wrapped up around 7 PM because my friend Angel Dust came over. She actually helped me draw this grumpy cute looking thing, which was the second enemy added to the game. I got back to work at 9 AM. Since this is a radial tower defense, I need to draw circles around the base to indicate tower placement and movement paths. I first tried to make small rivers with water tiles. I noticed how little space there is actually in the level, so I decided to zoom it out. This was better, but the river still felt too blocky. I decided to revisit it later and focus on combat. I drew a swoosh effect and animated the player swinging his staff. I made the enemies bounce slightly when hit. During testing, I accidentally set the knockback too high and sent the poor green guy flying, like a soccer ball. I gave enemies health so they could finally take damage. I created an enemy spawn and placed it at all entrances. Suddenly, we have a horde of enemies coming for a house. As if being surrounded from 4 sides wasn't already enough, I added 4 more entrances in the corners of the cave. I didn't like that the enemies just followed a straight line, so I added a bit of sway into the movement. Much better. Time for a quick break. Wait, oh no, what I have done? Help! Anyway, with combat shaping up, we need a currency. I got help from Angel Dust again, who drew a shiny gold coin for the game. I made enemies drop coins and added a small pull towards the player when you get close enough. I put a coin counter in the corner. Now it was time to add an actual tower. I considered ghosts or wisps, but went with flying wizards. Initially they wore grey robes and red scarves instead of beards. They were young wizards, I guess. Instead of rivers, I decided to draw thin circular paths for the wizards to follow. This allowed me to place 3 of them comfortably. I scripted the wizards to patrol the rings and added a key priest to spawn them. The wizards aren't volunteered though, so I added an on-screen button to hide them for 10 coins. Finally, I gave them a basic projectile attack that locks onto the nearest enemy. They are not the sharpest shooters, but in numbers they manage to keep the enemies at bay. I warped into the night, stopping at 12:30 AM. I started again at 12:30 PM. Up to this point, our house was indestructible. It's time to fix that. I added a simple health variable and made it take damage each second from any nearby enemy. I drew a destroyed version of the house and swapped the sprite when its health hit 0. The game restarts a few seconds later. With the core gameplay loop ready, I rushed to upload my game to itch.io and submit it early. But as you already know, that didn't happen. I opened the GTK jump page, only to find out that I'm 45 minutes late. I didn't pay enough attention to the jump deadline in my time zone, and it ended sooner than I thought. My heart sank for a moment, and I honestly considered abandoning the game at this point. But I got myself together. I went to the main jump page, and thankfully it still had 9 hours left. I could still salvage it. I decided to use the remaining time to polish the game, and that's exactly what I did. I went back and redrew the player as a little mushroom, seeing that I got this mushroom theme going. I adjusted the house color to match with the character, making it look more like a mushroom stem. I converted the cave entrances into proper floor tile, so you could walk inside them. I drew diagonal tiles to make the entrances smoother. This made the level look significantly less blocky. I used the water tile to add a river and a few ponds, with addition of still, animated and diagonal water tiles. I placed more sunlit spots on the ground and a lot more grass. I noticed that grey weavers blended too much with the brown ground, so I changed their robes to be blue and gave actual beds instead of scarves. For the final visual polish, I added shadows to the house, the player, the weavers, and the enemies. It was time for sound effects, and for this game I wanted to try to record everything myself, even though I only had a few hours left. On the day, I accidentally noticed that scratching a spoon against my plate makes a nice high-pitched sound, which I could use for the wizard projectiles. So I started and recorded myself doing that. Let's add some reverb and raise its pitch a little. Yep, that will do. For the enemy damage, I generated a simple retro console blip using Nescalin in LMMS. For the player attack, I made a swoosh sound by blowing into the mic. For coin pickups, I gently tapped my ceramic mug with a spoon. For spawning wizards, I mumbled a quick and pitched it down. And for the enemies munching on the house, I recorded a silly num num and pitched it up. Angel Dust had already composed a quirky melody earlier, so I arranged it with equally quirky instruments and put the final track together. I really like how it turned out. It fits the game mood perfectly. I made the Grumpy cubes drop 2 coins instead of 1, since they take 2 hits. And I finally finished that gallery I postponed on Friday. Tired, I prepared the game itch.io page and uploaded the final game builds. It's already past midnight. I opened the mini jump page, and you're gonna laugh at me. I was late again, by 20 minutes. I made the same mistake twice. I thought the mini jump submissions are going to close an hour later than they actually did. I don't really have an excuse. I just got too wrapped up in finishing the game. Luckily, Minijam allows late submissions. Huge thanks to Zachman for sending me a link on Discord so I could still submit. I ended up submitting the game on Monday at 1 AM. Well, things obviously didn't go as planned, and I really have no one to blame but myself and my poor attention. Still, it was all worth it in the end. My game was met with extremely positive feedback and some really helpful suggestions, and I was delighted to play all the participants' games. This jam had some fantastic entries. A few days after, I released a post-jam update, adding a new enemy, the Fire Guard, made by my friend Xilifol, and an in-game timer for tracking how long you survived. I also made the Grumpy Cube's textures a bit smoother. While I got the whole gameplay loop, there is definitely room for improvement. Right now, the progression boils down to hiring more wizards, with no end goal in mind, which gets repetitive pretty quickly. The game will be a lot more interesting with more towers, enemy waves, a core system, and maybe permanent upgrades, such as unlocking rings gradually. What do you think the game needs most? Let me know in the comments. I might update it if there's enough interest. You can play the game for free in your browser, links in the description. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.